should be seeing my logo here, Listed Trader logo here now.
Yep, that's what we see, Kris. We're good to go.
All right, super. Always these events for the Shark Indicator community. Really appreciate the opportunity. So that's me to the left here, and we have our market lizard to the right. We're based in Berlin, Germany, and as Ty mentioned before I started Lizard Trader here with Harry, I ran a startup that specialized in interpreting the sentiment in financial news stories. So one of the first applications that we found for this was actually the opening range. So we would compare the overnight and the pre-market sentiment in the financial news stories and use that to forecast the probability of the initial move in the market. But before I get ahead of myself here, let's just quickly go over our disclaimer as well. Trading is associated with considerable risk, so make sure you understand that and keep in mind that the results that we go over here today are hypothetical and not based on actual performance. It's not easy making it in this business. Succeeding as a trader is probably one of the hardest things you can try. And if you're just starting out at it and you're looking for a holy grail or a silver bullet, you will not find it because it does not exist. So I think what makes most sense is to start looking into price action setups, because trading is largely based on fear and greed, and what we see in price action setups reflect the human sentiment that traders experience from time to time. So it comes right down to understanding the oldest part of the brain, the reptilian brain or the lizard brain. And apart from that, it's really helpful to start thinking in terms of statistical probabilities. So for example, evaluating the expectancy of your setup. Let's take two systems here. In system A, 90% of the time you win $1 and the other 10% of the time you lose $10. So that's kind of typical for the scalping system approach. And in system B here, 10% of the time you win $10 and 90% of the time you lose $1. So that would be more like a breakout and a trend following system. Now, most people will select system A here because it wins 90% of the time, but it actually has what we call a negative expectancy, and this is how you find that out. Basically, any system with a expectancy less than 0 is a losing system. So system B is what we should be going with here. So what does that tell us? Why do most people choose system A over system B despite it having a negative expectancy? Well, it tells us that very few of us can actually handle winning only 10% of the time. And the reason is that we've all been conditioned to be right. So in school, we did our best to get good grades, and then we went out to make the right career choices, find the right spouse, the right place to live, with the right school for our children. And so bottom line, trading a system with a low winning percentage is very hard to handle psychologically. So if even system B has a positive expectancy, you might not be able to trade it the way it's supposed to be traded. And if that's the case, the statistical probabilities won't be of much use to us. So that's why we'll have a look at a hybrid approach today. It attempts to minimize the drawbacks of both trend and counter-trend systems. So to avoid the very low win rate seen in most trend and breakout systems, we will enter on pullbacks, not on the breakouts. So we'll do this in the context of a classic opening range breakout concept. We'll touch on the ACD system, which was presented by Mark Fisher in his book, The Logical Trader. In it, he describes how pivot levels can be used together with the opening range. And as we get into the hybrid approach, we'll look at how the efficiency ratio and the volume weighted average price can help us establish a market bias, and based on that, how to identify retracement setups. So let's just start with the opening range. As most of you will know, it's the most dynamic and active period of the trading day, with big volume, volatility, and major breakouts and reversals. Basically, this time window is not like any other of the trading day, and according to Fisher, it is statistically significant in marking the high or low for the day about 20% of the time. So that goes against the random walk theory of the markets. Fisher also describes opening ranges of anywhere between 5 and 45 minutes, depending on the market. But a lot has changed since he first published this book, and in today's algo-driven markets, high frequency trading, a lot happens during the first minute of the open, and therefore in volatile markets you might just as well look at the 1 minute opening range. So in addition, you will want to also pay attention to the pre-market high and low levels, as they often serve as important price action reference points during the regular session. So this is the crude oil contract in a 15-minute chart. We have a situation showing the opening range high plot close to the high of the day. And this is a 15-minute opening range. So from 9 to 9:15. Don't get confused by the time shown on my chart here. That's my time zone, Central European time. And I also display here a 1 minute opening range just to show how much actually happens during that first minute of the regular session. So this is a multi-time frame indicator. You're able to show opening ranges independently of the bar series used. So that's especially important for tick and volume charts. But also, let's say you wanted to have a 20-minute opening range here on a 15-minute chart. You could do that with this indicator. And as mentioned, these night and pre-session range high and low points will also work as support and resistance. So you see here there was brief support at the pre-session low in this sell-off here. Of course, the main concept is to find breakouts above or below the opening range, so a short breakout once the market moved below the opening range low on this one. But Fisher also works with the offset of ticks above and below the opening range, the A and C levels, to improve the statistical probabilities of these setups. So for example, he would go long once the A up level was broken here and set a stop loss at the opening range low, and a short entry would then trigger here at the break of the C down level, and a stop would then be set up here at the opening range high. So this offset here is determined partly on where the opening range and the current close plots compare to the pivot range. So for those of you who are not familiar with the pivot range, I'll just quickly go over that concept here now. Back in the day, floor traders used this simple range calculation here to establish the meat of the market from the previous session. So it's a range calculation of yesterday's price action with added weight to the close here. And by adding the central pivot and the directional pivot, you then have the pivot range here. And the central pivot is simply the high and the low divided by 2. And the directional pivot here is equaling the distance between the pivot and the central pivot, but it's wrapped in the direction of where the market closed last session. So in other words, if we have a green pivot range like we see here, the bulls won out here in the last session with a close near the high, whereas a red pivot range would mean that the last session ended on a bearish note. So in this example here, I'm using the high and the low of the previous regular Crude session to create the pivot levels. Crude trades at the NYMEX, of course, so many institutional traders will use the high and the low of yesterday's regular hours to determine the supports and resistance levels for the current session. And I think that's appropriate for most markets that are dominated by local traders, so that would be European, US and Asian index futures, bonds, and for some other commodity futures as well. So here we see the opening range here coincide with the second pivot resistance level, the R2 level up here. And then we saw this breakout here to the lower end of the opening range with brief support here at the first resistance level. It's support in this case because we're coming in on it from above. And following a news release here, we blew straight through the pivot range, finding brief support here at the confluence between the pre-low level here that we discussed earlier and the first support level. And then we settled here daily low at the second support level. And we'll now just have a look at why the markets respond to these support and resistance levels here. Again, we're looking at yesterday's range. So the distance from the pivot to the second resistance level equals yesterday's entire trading range above the pivot. So that will often mark the high of the day. And the second support level also equals yesterday's entire trading range, but below the pivot. So that will often be the low of the day. As for the distance between the first support and the first resistance level, that too is based on yesterday's trading range. So it's not really difficult to understand why Fisher chose The Logical Trader as the title for his book. Everyone and their mother knows where these levels are because they're just obvious and easy to calculate. So how does Fisher apply the pivot calculation to the opening range? Well, the offset levels are determined partly on where the current session opening range and close plots compared to the pivot range. For example, he distinguishes between plus and minus days. So a plus day is a opening range that plots below the pivot range and then ends with a close above the pivot range, whereas a minus day is an opening range that plots above the pivot and then ends with a close below the pivot range. In addition, Fisher also looks at the overall picture of the market by using a rolling pivot range, as well as hourly pivot for short-term trading. But as I said earlier, quite a bit has happened in the market since this approach was first described. And in order to determine market bias and market value, I prefer looking at the volume weighted average price. In addition, for this setup, I use the Kaufman efficiency ratio to align myself with the short-term bias. So that's what we'll have a look at coming up here. So this is from now on departing from the Fisher approach. The Kaufman efficiency ratio is also known as the fractal efficiency. So it's an alternative to the directional movement and the ADX indicators. So it compares momentum with volatility, and in a sideways market where there's no momentum in either direction, the indicator will drop, approaching the lowest value of the scale. So the scale is over here from 0 to 100. And in a sideways market, it will drop below the chop line here. In a perfect trend, where all bars close in the same direction and do not overlap, the efficiency ratio will approach the max value of 100. So it doesn't matter if the market is moving up or down. This is a strength index here. So a strong trend will be towards the 100 level, and choppy market will be below the chop line here towards 0. So a neat feature of this indicator is that the chop line actually adapts according to your look back period. So that's important because obviously it's a lot harder to get a perfect trend using a look back of 100 bars as opposed to when you're just looking at 10 bars. Also here we're working with balanced momentum calculation, which is important if you want to avoid any dropout effects. We recently featured this in an indicator spotlight, so you might consider signing up for that at Lizard Indicators if you're interested in learning more about this. As for the volume weighted average price, all you need is price and volume data. This is a calculation that starts with the first transaction of the session ending with the last prior to market close. So what we have here is a daily VWAP chart of the crude oil contract, again 15 minutes, and we have a blue staple line when the prices are moving above the VWAP, and then it's red when prices are moving below it. And then we use standard deviation bands to represent a value area. So in an uptrend like this, we're looking to buy when prices retrace back to the value area here. And following the regular open, we initially saw the market hovering around the opening range high, just below the pre-session high. And then after the breakout from this area, we then had a chance to enter on this retracement, just touching the value area. And of course, the big question is how to determine where and when these retracement setups are favorable. And to find out, we use the zero lag oscillator, which is designed for a hybrid system approach. This is a 5-minute chart of CL, and we see the histogram cross here coincide with the breakout from the opening range high and the pre-session high. We have green histogram and paint bars, and so we're looking for long setups taking retracements following this breakout here. And retracements are signaled by these white bars here. They indicate a short-term oversold in the uptrend. And once we have a bar that closes above the high of these white setup bars, we have confirmation that buyers are returning to pursue the trend. And later on, we see what we call a pyramid signal here. These are retracements that follow the initial signal after the zero line cross. And generally speaking, the first retracement is the most reliable signal here. And the stop is set just below the low of the retracement bar. So the risk-reward ratio on these are usually pretty good. As you see here, we also are aligned with the VWAP. It's not so easy to see here, but this is the VWAP here. It's blue sloping upwards. And we have the efficiency ratio here just moving above the chop line in this case, and then moving higher up here to indicate the strength of the trend. So this is what it looks like in a short scenario with the zero lag oscillator. We broke into the downside of the opening range here, and we have a histogram below the zero line. So we're looking for a short-term overbought, and that's what these yellow bars are signaling in a short scenario. It's a retracement cutting into the downtrend, and once we have a bar that close below the low of our retracement setup, we have confirmation that sellers are likely to continue pushing this lower. And again, we're aligned here with the VWAP, and the efficiency ratio is just cutting above the chop line in this example. So a bit of luck in this one. So the next step is to put it all together using Bloodhound. You can then specify your trading rules in an objective form and then test the statistical probabilities of success. It's fairly easy to do this with Bloodhound. You don't have to be a programmer to do it. Basically, it's just a really fast and efficient way to determine whether your system idea has some validity to it. So coming up here, I'm just going to show you the Bloodhound template that we've created for this setup and show you the backtest results. So all the conditions that we talked about so far are shown here as solvers, function, and logic nodes. The main theme obviously is the opening range. Are we trading above or below it? And then we're looking to distinguish between trending and sideways scenarios with the efficiency ratio. Also, we want to avoid entering oversold and overbought, so we use the current day VWAP to establish market value, and then we have the zero lag oscillator to identify the retracement setups. So here we have a crossover solver looking at the opening range high and low. This is looking at the pre-session high and low. And then these ones here are looking at the key support and resistance level from the pivot and VWAP levels with the requirement that these breakouts on these levels have to be aligned with the opening range. So if we're seeing a breakout to the upside of one of these key support and resistance levels, it has to be with a close above the opening range. Zero lag retracements and pyramiding signals in here. We have the daily VWAP slope analysis here, value analysis here of the VWAP, and then the Kaufman efficiency ratio. Are we above or below the chop line in here? And finally, we have a time window at work here. Trading starts 15 minutes into the session once the initial action has calmed down a bit, and we also don't take setups that go straight into the close of the session. I also want to stay clear of the weekly crude and natural gas inventory reports, so Wednesday and Thursday look for setups after those have been released. As for management of the signals, you can automate that using Blackbird by activating an extra template for identifying exit at key support and resistance. So basically, once a position is up 10 ticks, I will start looking for the next viable support and resistance level. And once that is hit, start a trailing stop for the remainder of the position to manage the open profit. So in this case here, we first broke yesterday's close, and then took a quick profit as we came in on pivot support, and then the trail stop was taken out here as we did the first test of the first support level. And then we got a second chance at the second test of the first support level, and this time we took a profit out at the confluence here of a previous VWAP level and yesterday's low, and then the trailing stop was taken out here at the second support level. So the listed trader approach is pretty much what you see is what you get. It's certainly not a secret black box where you're wondering what's hiding under the hood. That's not what works when you're trying to figure out what the market is going to do next. What works are transparent and well-established concepts that traders trust, agree, and execute on. So you can think of it as a self-fulfilling prophecy, basically. Both the pivot and VWAP levels are the same for everyone because they're based on objective price benchmarks. So for pivots, it's the high and the low and the close of the previous session. And for the VWAP, the volume weighted average of the contracts traded during the session. So it comes down to understanding the concept of herd mentality. That's in a nutshell what technical trading is all about, finding these situations where critical mass of traders are likely to respond in a coordinated way to the same price levels at the same time. As far as the statistical probabilities on this, we have a percent profitable of well over 57%, a profit factor of 2.19, and an average expectancy here of about $100 per trade. As you see, we're slightly skewed to the short side in terms of profitability and number of trades, with a total net profit just north of 17,000 with a drawdown of about 1,800. So if it's all right with everyone, I'm now going to transition into the special promotion that we've prepared for you today. That too is pretty straightforward. The offer includes all the tools that we've talked about today, Bloodhound Ultimate and the listed trader session packages, the zero lag oscillator, and the opening range multi-time frame indicator. And a couple of pretty cool bonus specials as well here. I'm offering additional free one-on-one consultations for the first 5 registrants here today. We can customize this according to your needs, of course. For example, just getting everything set up for your machine, taking care of the install process, workspaces, defining the regular session templates, customizing it to your trading style with the risk preference settings, time windows, etc., or just general inquiries, whatever questions you may have on our indicators or system trading in general. Second, we have the strategy template with the parameters for defining the opening range together with the key supports and resistance breakout levels, the zero lag oscillator, and the efficiency ratio with the VWAP. This particular template, as you've seen, was developed for CL. That's what I mainly focus on. But it's pretty much a universal concept for any instrument that has a cache open. So you will be able to adapt this to pretty any other market or instrument that you trade. And finally, you get a free membership to our new indicator library for NinjaTrader 8. So far, we have about 80 indicators in there. So that's where you'll find the ANA indicator conversions to NinjaTrader 8. Harry hasn't gotten around to converting all of them yet. So the library will eventually expand far beyond what it is today. There are also a couple of new releases that you won't find anywhere else, and you'll have a special membership discount on any future premium indicator releases that we come up with. So everything we talked about with the session indicators here, the zero lag oscillator, the strategy template, consulting session, and of course Bloodhound Ultimate here is included in this promotional offer. Normal price is just north of 2,100. So at a total of $1,595, you get Bloodhound at a pretty sweet discount here today. In total, it's about 25% off on the entire package here. I haven't gotten into a really detailed description of everything that's included, but it's quite extensive indicator suite. So for the pivots, we talked about the daily pivots here today, but we also have the weekly and the monthly pivot levels, and we also have something that is called the Jackson zones. And as for the session VWAP package, that is also quite extensive. We have weekly, monthly, as well as quarterly and rolling VWAP calculations. We have TVAPs as well in there. And if you're trading instruments that do not have reliable volume information, you can use the range weighted average price calculation for approximating the VWAP. So that would be appropriate for Forex products or cryptocurrencies, for example. And for existing Bloodhound users, it's a total of $995 here. That's also about 25% discount. I should mention again that the consulting sessions are only available for the first 5 registrants, and those usually go pretty quick, so just be aware of that. We also have a special offer featuring the indicator package together with both Bloodhound and Blackbird. That way you can get the strategy signals as well as a template for management of the trades. So you'll find this at listatrader.com/sharkwebinar. And before I wrap this up here, we're not really big on testimonials, but I think it's in order to mention that Harry was voted Programmer of the Year in the True Edge Awards over at futures.io. If you look at half of the top downloads of all time in that forum, they're his. So I guess that speaks for itself as to how the tools are valued by the NinjaTrader community. Okay, so again, this is where you get the special promo for this event, listatrader.com/sharkwebinar. We'll have it up until this weekend. So if it's something you're considering, head on over to listatrader.com/sharkwebinar now and check it out. Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation. I'll have a look at the questions here and try to answer as many of them as I can. If I don't get around to answering all of them, you can get in touch with me via the contact form over at listatrader.com, otherwise at info@listatrader.com. And you can also get in touch with me for one-on-one Skype calls if you'd like to direct any questions about the presentation or the indicators. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ty, and then we can have a look at the questions together.
Awesome, Kris. Hey, yeah, you can actually undock the questions pane right from the GoToWebinar window there, and you can just take a look at them.
Let's see here. All right, so risk disclosure did not show. Well, I hope you heard what I said about it.
You can just scroll to the bottom and you'll see the most recent questions.
Yeah. Okay, so the question, when the zero lag oscillator will be released for NinjaTrader 8? We kind of got caught up in a update of the session indicators for NinjaTrader 8, and that bug just took a lot longer than what we expected, and kind of leaked into some of the indicators in the library as well. So we had to take care of that. And currently Harry is on vacation, so he's taking some time off, well deserved. He's been working really hard on getting this ready for NinjaTrader 8, but I think in a couple of weeks we will have the zero lag oscillator ready, and then we will work on the auction bars and get that out there as well. How is the blue band outside the S1 and R1 calculated? That's sort of just a visual tool to help you identify these support and resistance levels. And yeah, we were talking about the opening range here today, so not the initial balance. The opening range that we have created for NinjaTrader 8, it's sort of like a combination of both the opening range and the initial balance. So you have the range extensions of the opening range. You can choose between the opening range itself or the pre-session high and low points to define the targets. How many trades does it take a day? Well, this is not a system that trades a whole lot, so it's more like a couple of trades a week. So I think the statistics here is 2 or 3 trades per week. So I guess that's answered about NinjaTrader 8. We're working on the updates for zero lag and auction bars. They will be out. Zero lag will be out soon, and then the auction bars is a little bit more complicated, so we'll work on that following the completion of the zero lag. So you already have Bloodhound Ultimate, Richie. Well, I guess you saw the offer also for just the indicator package, so take a look at that if you're interested. There is also a Blackbird template hero if you're interested in that. I'll be happy to share that with you as well. Can you send a wire transfer? Yeah, that should be okay as well. Just get in touch with me at info@listatrader.com, and then I can provide you the details. This does work on NinjaTrader 7, Jerry. That's what I've been showing today. I think Shark is working really hard to get it updated for NinjaTrader 8 as well, but I think we should probably leave it for Jeremy to provide further details on exact date for a launch of that. In the background there, of course, on the interface it looks well clean and very easy, but in the background here, it's software development is just a lot more complicated than what it looks up front. So it's just really important that everything works correctly, and yeah, our main focus is on quality of the product and that it actually works. So yeah, that's the main focus for us. What are these indicators in Sweetprint are in piece? Bill, if you can specify that question, I'm not sure I understand it. If I have Gert, if I have something like this for the London session, yes, you can define the opening range also for the London session. Just keep in mind that Crude in that time window is kind of an aggregate of Brent. Of course, it's oil, but it's has a different focus and culture and tradition. So you know, maybe the regular pivot levels would not be appropriate for that, I would certainly test it with ETH pivots, Globex pivots. What is a good bar range setting with the Kaufman efficiency tool? Jerry, that will depend on the instrument that you're trading. I'm not sure I understand the question, so if you can specify it, that would be great. And let's see. The difference between Shark Indicator and Bloodhound? Well, Bloodhound is actually a product of Shark Indicators. So Shark Indicators is the company name, and Bloodhound and Blackbird, those are two of the products that they provide here. Some of the indicators are available on futures, yeah, Jerry. So take a look at the download section there for NinjaTrader 8, and you'll find some of Harry's indicators. I think he will release most of what was available for NinjaTrader 7 there, and then we will continue to expand our indicator library beyond that. So Hero, you just purchased, you're on a trial currently. So no, we do not need to create a new user ID. I'll just convert that into a permanent license for you. Brian, you've been a customer for a year. How do I access the new NinjaTrader 8 website? Well, the NinjaTrader 8 website is lizardindicators.com. We just at some point made a decision to make a clean website for NinjaTrader 8 products and the library there. And yeah, the process of converting everything to NinjaTrader 8 was just a lot more work than we had anticipated. So there's just a flat fee membership for the indicator library. Otherwise, you will get a free update for any NinjaTrader 7 premium indicators that you purchased. All right, so let's see. The questions are moving as I'm reading them. So, okay, so which indicator prints R and P? That's the pivot indicator. No, that's the zero lag oscillator. The R stands for retracement, and P stands for pyramiding. I think I mentioned that briefly in the presentation. So the first retracement into the trend is generally the highest probability signal, and then the pyramiding signals can be used to add to a open position. That's how it was initially thought. If you're on a trial, you do not need to uninstall the version before you get the purchase product. We just convert the license into a permanent license Hero, so you don't need to worry about that. Jerry, for this Kaufman efficiency setting, I think I used a 20 bar look back on the 5-minute chart on this. And let's see if we have, Jerry, you can also get the Bloodhound template that I've shown, but just keep in mind that this is created with the premium indicators that we offer, so it will not work without the premium indicators. All right, so the trial that we have on offer is for 2 weeks, so that should be enough time to figure out if it's working for you or not. The idea of having a free trial is, of course, that yeah, you need to figure out if it's the right approach for you. And there's nothing that we hate more than dissatisfied customers. So we always recommend that you take a trial before you make a purchasing decision. So I think that's it for the questions here today. As I said, if you want to get in touch with me, you can shoot me an email over at info@listertrader.com, and I'd be happy to set up a Skype conference as well to do any follow-up questions. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in here. I hope it's been of value to everyone, and I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ty, and thanks a lot, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Kris. Phenomenal presentation, man. Like he said, guys, if you need to get in touch with him, if any of your questions didn't get answered, that's info@lizardtrader.com. If you have any shark-specific questions, you can throw them towards support@sharkindicators.com. And for anyone who tuned in late, we will be sending the recording of this webinar out tomorrow morning, so just look for that in your inbox. And everyone have a great day. Thanks again, Kris.